Okay, so usually when I do this, I don't start with using the actual window as something that you can reference by like literal tracing on here. You can see that I kind of did a little bit of that yesterday, and it helped some of the students like a lot, right? Usually I don't introduce that until after you've had a chance to do it without the tracing, just because, you know, if this works for you without that, great, then we don't need to go back to this. But again, I had people in the Tuesday class struggle with this, you know, I don't know that everybody got a good feel for this on Monday. So I've made sure to make a still life that has very large, right, some medium-sized stuff, and then some things that I think I can use for a basic unit of measure, right? So like when we talked a little bit about like how to draw the human figure, we talked about how the skull or the head, right? That's the basic unit of measure. We use that to measure the proportions for the body, right? With the face, we use eyes, okay? So the skull out here is gonna be a really handy thing for me to use for that. So maybe asking you, like, if you remember, what's the first thing that I'm gonna do with my viewfinder? Like when I start to get a good picture plane in front of me, if you remember. It's like, we all slept a little bit, right? Anybody remember? Find your target, right? Like where you wanna put that crosshair. So think of it like, you know, a shooting range kind of thing. And make sure that it's something that you can go back to. I had students in Tuesday that seemed like they had a hard time putting this back, you know, in that target area so that they could continue to evaluate what's within the picture plane. Because if you change all the time, you can't keep it consistent. You can't like measure things, right? So when you choose that, don't choose something, as I had a student yesterday did this, don't choose a general area. Like you wouldn't want to choose, okay, like the female mannequin's head, just the whole thing, you know, just anywhere in there. That's not gonna work. You need to find a good pinpoint, right? Now, if you remember what we did here, we developed a quadrant situation, right, to what we have here. Okay, so I'm just gonna real fast do that. I'm gonna zip through some of this stuff that you already know. And then I really more or less just wanna kind of show some of that assistive stuff that can help. And if you did not get a good sketch going like last time, you can use what's happening out here. Okay. The other thing is, it's really important, and I think that I saw everybody doing this pretty well. It's really important to have your arm completely outstretched. I saw several of you doing this kind of a thing, and that's perfectly fine, right? Sometimes my students will actually clip this on here. I have some clips that you can use. That way you don't have to worry about, you know, holding it out there all the time. But I find that doing something that involves both hands helps me a lot, right? So having a different color of Sharpie is gonna help with that. I'm not gonna choose the skull because I wanna get the big figure in here. So I actually think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select this tape right here because I feel like that's gonna be a good spot, and it's going to allow me to get most of this figure in, some of this figure, and these basic points of reference, right? You wanna get to where this is a quick thing, okay? We don't wanna spend a lot of time on this. We wanna like capture it, get it on, and then spend our time really evaluating depth in form. Okay, so if that's where I want it to go, okay, a couple of different methods that we used for this is thinking about, okay, where do these figures line up within our quadrants? That helps some people to think about like how far away from these areas. We are gonna be talking about negative space today. Some people, that works for them really well to look at the distance between subjects, and that's why it's nice to have this black background and these white subjects. So I'm just gonna kind of rough things in first. I'm gonna make sure that I have a good vantage point happening here. So my skull's gonna be way over in the corner, and this isn't like a super convenient place for me to start, but I'm gonna work with it. So I can see about this much of the torso. I like to use shape analysis, so I'm just gonna go with some basic shape structures happening in here. Now once I kind of have that worked out, like I know that's where the tape's gonna be, then I may need to make some marks on here so that I can line it up repeatedly. So what I'm gonna do now is move to my Sharpie. So if this is something that you're having a hard time like figuring out your picture plane again, this is the method that you can use to make that happen. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a mark where I think I might have trouble, like right here where I think that hand is going to be. So I'm literally going to trace around that hand and just kind of create a shape for that. Then I'm going to go ahead and look over here at the head of the mannequin. I'm going to go ahead and just make a basic circle there. I'm going to line it back up to make sure I still see those in the right spot. And just for a little bit more assistance, I'm going to draw that area where the mannequin would be cut in half. So that's kind of where that is. That's where this head is. And this hand is a point of reference for me. So now when I line that back up, it's going to be easier for me to look at my crosshair where it goes. And I'm closing one of my eyes the whole time because these need to render as shapes, right? Not forms. Then I'm looking at, is this hand in here? Is that head in here? Is this going to be a good portion area for this to happen for the edge of the torso? So I can actually take this and look at how that works with what I have here. It's like way over in the corner. Boom. I can just go ahead and like drop that in if that helps me. If I think that this is pretty much in the middle of this, it might help me to create kind of like a little schematic for that. The hand may be a little bit more difficult. So I think I'm actually going to use my basic unit of measure to try to get the torso worked out right. And again, every time you do this, be very careful to make sure that you have it lined back up where it goes. Yes? So now, whoops. So now just to make sure that like I have that skull in proportion to the other things, I'm going to line it all back up. I'm going to carefully bring my Sharpie back over. That's where my skull exists. So because I have my skull here and I have this logged here, I'm just going to come off here just a little bit. And they should be about the same size because they're both heads, right? Okay, so moving from this now, I kind of know where my skull is going to be. I'm going to abandon that for now. I'm going to do pencil sighting. And I'm going to go ahead and check out that skull. I'm going to start on this figure since it's closer. I'm going to start from the top, 1, 2, 3.5. So she kind of goes this way. That's another thing that I think I talked about Monday, but I'm not sure, so I'm trying to hit that. When you have a significant gesture going a specific way, like the way this is going here, in order to get this arc to work for you, you need to like get your pencil out in front of you, okay? So like for you all, you're standing nice and straight, but you know, if Tony did this, come on, get your lean on, dude. There we go, see? Boom. That way I can mark that. And then as long as I keep that, when I come back, I can try to get that same thing. So I have this and this. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up and close in one eye. Then I bring it over like this. And I just make a gesture mark that goes straight through that. Trying to keep that same gesture, right? So try to keep that at the same tilt, as it were. So if this is 3.5, 1, 2, 3.5, I'm in proportion. So now I'm going to worry about tall guy. But I'm going to start from the top because I really don't see the whole thing, right? So from the top of the neck, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 down to the knees. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at, with my viewfinder, how much of that figure do I see, right? So I'm lining it back up on the tape. I'm getting my hand, my skull, and my other face going on over there. Okay, so I see the knees existing right about here. So I think what I'm going to do to help me with that, and again, these are things that you may not need, but if you do, use it. It'll help you a lot. I'm going to draw a simple line from knee to knee, like this. And that's going to help me with the pitch that I need to discover down here. But first, I need to figure out my basic unit of measure, which would I come up with 6 on that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is roughly where I'm going to be looking to get those knees in there, right? So this is pretty close to here. As long as I get that same pitch going on, and I kind of get that worked out here, I know those knees are going to exist in there. Because I have this hand area pretty close to this, I can start looking at, you know, how far away is this? It's a little closer to this than this. So I might go ahead and just gesture that in here. And if it's wrong, then I fix it later. So this is the point at which you would begin to articulate what you have, right? This should be enough for you. If it's not, then we gesture more, we add more shapes, right? Like maybe you want to flesh out the whole torso. But I don't think I need this to do that at this point. because I think I have enough information. So I'm just going to kind of follow what I have here. Again, I like to use gesture marking. So I feel like that arm's going to kind of come down. I'm going to look at where that elbow comes across. The elbow's going to come across the abs in here. Then that arm's going to come back this way. The hand comes over here. I was off just a little bit. Now I'm going to go ahead and work in the rest of the rib cage stuff happening in here. If I think I'm off for any reason, like if I make the, one problem I have with figures is I make the torsos a little bit too long. That's something that like is a weird feature of my body, and we're used to drawing ourselves because we look at ourselves all the time. So I have to double check on things like that. So I'm going to use my basic unit of measure to go from top to where that separation is below the belly button. So I see 3 of those. So I'm going to go. I did make it too long. I knew I did, I could tell. So that's going to help me go, okay, you know, this should actually be where it is. I'm going to use this for kind of the pelvic area. One thing I haven't talked about too much, and we'll talk about this more when we get into figure drawing, is contrapposto. Anybody know what that means? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. So contrapposto is like a fancy Italian word that basically means imbalanced, right? So you know how when you were in like music and you were a kid and you were going to sing for your parents and they told you what? Don't lock your knees. Right? And I'm sure you've all had this experience where some kid locked their knees and they either passed out or they puked, or both, which was always fun, right? The reason for that is because you tense up like crazy when you're nervous, right? When we're relaxed, we put most of our weight on one side, usually. So when we look at his figure, his weight is like this, okay? And that causes a shift from top of the hip to the other hip. So that's another angle we need to think about, right? That also causes those feet to be not completely straight across, like that other foot's going to come out this way. So the reason that I angled this like this is because I'm trying to follow that contrapposto. Now if you see up here, those shoulders are a little bit, they kind of straighten out a little bit more, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and gesture the rest. This knee is going to go pretty much straight down. Remember, this was my knee area. This other knee kind of comes out, right? And they look like they're about equal, but not perfectly equal, right? So then I'll start fleshing this in, now that I feel like I have all that stuff. This is when we start erasing, we start cleaning stuff up, we start making our drawing look more realistic, and then we pay attention to contour, right? Okay, so I wanted to just go over some of those things, like if you feel like you need to do this tracing business, do it, right? I encourage you, if you do that, to use a really bright marker, okay? That's why I use this like magenta color, because I wanted to be able to see it really well. You can wipe these off with the cleansing wipe thingies, because they have alcohol in them, from time to time, yes? But really, once we have our information, I want you to abandon this, okay? Cool. Do you think this will help any of you? Possibly. Like if you struggled with this on Monday, give this a shot. Give this whole like tracing on this thing a shot. It'll definitely help you. Cool? Okay,